A torrential downpour battered the sprawling, multi-million-dollar estate. Cale, a single father in a soaked, threadbare delivery uniform, stood on the pristine marble steps of the main entrance. He held the small, trembling hand of his 6-year-old son, Finn. The service alley was completely flooded with deep, freezing mud, and Finn's worn-out sneakers were already falling apart. Cale had no choice but to use the front door to deliver the priority package. Suddenly, the massive oak doors swung open. Veda, a billionaire CEO radiating cold arrogance, stepped out with her sneering estate manager. Seeing Cale's wet boots staining her immaculate marble, her face twisted in absolute disgust. "Use the back door, trash," Veda snarled. With a ruthless swipe of her hand, she knocked the package from Cale's grip, sending it splashing into the freezing mud. She threw a crumpled $50 bill directly at his chest. "Get this filth off my property." Cale's jaw tightened. Swallowing a burning wave of humiliation, he shielded his terrified son, silently picked up the ruined box, and walked back into the unforgiving storm. The interior of Cale's rusted, sputtering delivery truck offered little protection from the freezing storm, but it was the only sanctuary they had. He lifted little Finn onto the torn vinyl passenger seat, wrapping his own dry, spare flannel shirt around the boy's shivering shoulders. The broken heater blew only a faint stream of lukewarm air, barely enough to defrost the mud-splattered windshield. Cale looked down at the crumpled $50 bill in his hand, the exact piece of paper Veda had thrown at him like he was a diseased animal. The money burned against his pride, but pride couldn't keep his son warm. He drove to a brightly lit, cheap fried chicken drive-thru on the edge of the city. Swallowing his humiliation, he used the money to buy a large, steaming bucket of chicken and a cup of hot chocolate. Sitting in the dimly lit cab of the truck, Cale carefully wiped the freezing mud from Finn's cheeks and watched his son eagerly eat the warm food. "Aren't you going to eat, Dad?" Finn asked, his small voice muffled around a piece of chicken. He held out a drumstick, his innocent eyes looking up with pure, unselfish concern. "I'm completely stuffed, buddy. I had a massive sandwich right before I picked you up." Cale lied smoothly, forcing a gentle, reassuring smile, while his own empty stomach twisted in a painful, hollow knot of hunger. As Finn ate, Cale rubbed his freezing hands together. They were rough and deeply calloused from carrying heavy boxes, but beneath the recent layers of dirt were older, much darker marks. Thick, jagged scars crisscrossed his knuckles and thick forearm scars that absolutely did not come from delivering packages. They were the unmistakable marks of combat, of shattered glass, shrapnel, and burning wreckage. 4 years ago, Kyle had been a legend. He was Captain Kyle, an elite combat medic for the military's most classified special operations unit. He was a phantom of the battlefield, a man who possessed the terrifying, almost miraculous ability to snatch dying soldiers back from the absolute brink of death under heavy enemy fire. But when his wife unexpectedly passed away, Cale's entire universe collapsed. Standing over her grave, holding an orphaned toddler, Cale made an unbreakable vow. He realized that Finn didn't need a decorated war hero or a folded flag. He just needed a father who would come home every single night. Cale deliberately walked away from his elite career, burying his legendary status to become a ghost in the civilian world. He willingly endured the crushing poverty, the exhausting labor, and the ruthless insults of arrogant billionaires like Veda, all to shield Finn from a world of violence and loss. But a warrior never truly forgets his nature. Hidden deep beneath the crushed cardboard and delivery logs at the very bottom of his duffel bag was a heavy, unmarked black pouch, a fully stocked, military-grade trauma kit. The legendary medic was dormant, but he was never truly gone. Inside the palatial estate, the freezing storm was completely forgotten. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over the grand ballroom, where Veda stood at the center of the city's elite. Holding a flute of vintage champagne, the billionaire CEO was mere seconds away from signing a historic, multi-billion-dollar merger. Near the edge of the room, sitting quietly in a velvet-lined wheelchair, was Veda's 70-year-old mother. Without warning, the elegant atmosphere was violently shattered. The elderly woman gasped, her hands flying to her chest as a massive, crushing pain seized her heart. Her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed out of her wheelchair, hitting the polished marble floor with a sickening thud. "Mother!" Veda shrieked, dropping her champagne glass. It shattered into 100 sparkling pieces as she dropped to her knees beside the convulsing woman. Absolute panic erupted among the wealthy guests. Men in tailored suits and women in designer gowns backed away in horror, completely useless in the face of a real emergency. The arrogant estate manager fumbled with his phone, desperately dialing emergency services. He barked into the receiver, but his face quickly drained of all color. "The storm," the manager stammered, his voice trembling as he looked down at Veda. "A massive oak tree just collapsed across the main highway. The paramedics said they can't get their ambulances through. It will take them at least 20 minutes to hike up here." 20 minutes. In the brutal mathematics of a massive myocardial infarction, 20 minutes was an absolute death sentence. Oxygen deprivation would permanently destroy her brain in less than 5. Veda clutched her mother's pale, lifeless hand, letting out a guttural, agonizing scream. She was one of the most powerful women in the country. She possessed endless bank accounts, private jets, and thousands of employees. But as her mother's lips turned a terrifying shade of blue, Veda realized the agonizing truth. All the wealth in the world was completely worthless against the grip of death. She was entirely powerless. Just outside the estate's towering iron gates, Kael was pushing his rusted delivery truck through the flooded street when the engine finally gave out with a pathetic, metallic groan. He stepped out into the blinding rain, popping the hood to check the battery. Then, cutting through the howling wind, he heard it. The raw, desperate scream of a woman watching someone die. Kael froze. The humiliated, mud-splattered delivery man vanished instantly. His posture straightened, his eyes narrowing into cold, lethal focus. The legendary Special Operations Combat Medic, a man conditioned to run directly into the jaws of hell, awakened. He didn't hesitate. He pulled open the truck door and grabbed the heavy, unmarked black trauma kit from the bottom of his duffel bag. "Lock the doors, Finn. Do not open them for anyone," Kael commanded, his voice vibrating with absolute authority. Ignoring the freezing mud and the brutal insults he had suffered just an hour ago, Kael turned toward the mansion. Carrying the heavy medical bag, he sprinted back toward the towering gates, moving through the torrential storm like an unstoppable force of nature. Kael sprinted up the sweeping driveway, the torrential rain instantly soaking him to the bone. As he reached the pristine marble portico, 2 massive estate security guards stepped into his path, their hands reaching for their radios. "Hey, get back to the alley, trash!" The lead guard bellowed over the howling storm. Kael didn't even break his stride. The humiliated, submissive delivery driver was dead. In a blur of lethal, military-grade, close-quarters combat, Kael executed a devastating palm strike to the first guard's chest, instantly dropping the massive man to the wet marble. Without missing a beat, he pivoted, sweeping the second guard's legs out from under him and neutralizing the threat in less than 3 seconds. The main entrance to the ballroom had been locked from the inside by panicked staff. Kael didn't bother knocking. He grabbed a heavy, 100-pound bronze garden statue from a decorative pedestal, hoisted it over his shoulder with terrifying, adrenaline-fueled ease, and hurled it directly at the reinforced double doors. Crash. A deafening explosion of tempered glass echoed through the estate. Kael stepped through the jagged frame and into the warm golden light of the grand ballroom, the driving storm roaring behind him. His heavy work boots crunched loudly over the shattered glass. The crowd of terrified billionaires and elite investors scrambled backward, shrieking in horror at the sight of the soaked, menacing intruder. Veda, kneeling beside her blue-lipped, motionless mother, looked up with tear-streaked fury. "You! How dare you!" she screamed, her voice cracking with pure hysteria. "Get this garbage out of my house." Kael didn't waste a single breath arguing with the untouchable CEO. He marched directly to her, grabbed the billionaire tightly by her designer shoulder, and effortlessly shoved her aside. "Out of my way," he commanded, his voice dropping into a cold, booming register that carried the absolute, unquestionable authority of a battlefield commander. He dropped to his knees right on the dangerous carpet of broken glass. Needing absolute freedom of movement, Cale grabbed the collar of his wet, cheap delivery uniform and ruthlessly ripped it open. The torn fabric fell away, drawing a collective, breathless gasp from the wealthy crowd. Stripped of his shabby clothes, Cale's torso was a roadmap of pure survival. Thick, corded muscle, violently crisscrossed with pale, jagged shrapnel scars and bullet wounds. This was not the body of a scavenger. His scarred hands unzipped the heavy black trauma kit, moving with the blinding, mechanical precision of a legendary combat medic. In seconds, he withdrew a military-grade portable defibrillator and a preloaded syringe of pure adrenaline. He jammed the epinephrine directly into the elderly woman's thigh, then slapped the cold AED pads onto her failing chest. "Clear!" Cale roared, his voice shaking the crystal chandeliers above. The machine whined, delivering a massive shock that jerked the elderly woman's body off the marble floor. Instantly, Cale interlocked his scarred hands over her sternum and began brutal, rhythmic chest compressions, fighting the Reaper barehanded while the city's most powerful elite watched in absolute, paralyzed awe. Cale's muscles burned with lactic acid, but he didn't stop the brutal, rhythmic compressions. "Stay with me," he growled. Suddenly, a faint, ragged gasp escaped the elderly woman's pale lips. Her chest hitched, and a weak but steady pulse returned to her veins. At that exact second, the heavy oak doors burst open. A team of city paramedics, led by the chief of emergency medicine, rushed into the ballroom, drenched from the storm. The chief pushed through the panicked crowd, preparing to take over. But when he saw the massive, scarred man kneeling on the floor, he froze dead in his tracks. "Captain Cale?" The chief breathed, the color draining from his face. "The Special Operations Combat Medic? Good God. We thought you vanished off the grid 4 years ago." The words rippled through the ballroom like a shockwave. The elite billionaires and investors stared in paralyzed disbelief. The mud-splattered delivery man they had looked at with absolute disgust was a decorated, living military legend. Veda scrambled forward, tears streaming down her flawless makeup. But before she could speak, her mother's eyelids fluttered open. The frail woman's gaze drifted upward, locking onto Cale's bare, muscular forearm. Her eyes widened as they traced a very specific, jagged scar shaped like a crescent moon. "Veda," the elderly woman rasped, her trembling hand reaching up to weakly grasp Cale's wrist. "Veda, look, the scar." Veda stared, confused, until her mother's tears began to fall. 10 years ago, the old woman wept, her voice barely a whisper in the silent room, when our car flipped. When the engine caught fire and we were trapped in the burning wreckage, the faceless hero who pulled us from the flames before the explosion, I never forgot the scar on his arm. It was him, Veda. It was him. The horrifying realization slammed into the billionaire CEO like a freight train. The air violently left her lungs. The man she had just called trash, the man whose livelihood she had thrown into the freezing mud, was the exact same guardian angel who had saved her family's life a decade ago, and he had just done it again. "All right, step aside, delivery boy." The arrogant estate manager suddenly barked, shoving his way forward, completely oblivious to the shifting gravity of the room. "The real doctors are here. Take your garbage and get out." Smack. The sound of Veda's hand connecting with the manager's face echoed like a gunshot across the ballroom. The manager stumbled backward, clutching his rapidly bruising cheek in sheer terror. "You are fired," Veda screamed, her voice cracking with absolute raw fury. "Get out of my house. Get out of my sight right now." Then the untouchable billionaire turned back to Kyle. Slowly, agonizingly, the most powerful woman in the city collapsed to her knees. She didn't care about her designer dress or the jagged shards of broken glass digging into her bare skin. She wept, openly and desperately, at the feet of the poor single father. "I am so sorry," Veda begged, her voice trembling with suffocating shame. "Please forgive me. You saved us. Twice. I will give you millions, a blank check. Anything you want, please just let me make this right." Kale didn't blink. He calmly zipped up his unmarked trauma kit and hoisted it over his scarred shoulder. His eyes were completely devoid of anger, holding only a cold, quiet pity. Keep your money, Veda, Kale said, his deep voice slicing through the dead silent room with lethal precision. Your front door is far too dirty for me. And all the billions in the world can't buy the beat of a human heart. Without a single backward glance, the legendary soldier turned his back on the kneeling billionaire, stepped over the shattered glass, and walked out into the freezing storm to find his son.
That breathtaking moment when Veda collapsed onto the shattered glass, sobbing at the feet of the exact man she had called trash, is a brutal but necessary reminder of how quickly life can shatter our arrogance. We live in a society that is dangerously obsessed with titles, bank accounts, and the price tags on our clothes. Veda looked at Kael and saw only a muddy delivery uniform, completely blind to the legendary hero standing before her. She didn't realize that true superheroes don't wear capes. They wear threadbare shirts, drive rusted trucks, and work exhausting, humble jobs just to put warm food in their children's hands. Karma has a terrifyingly perfect way of delivering its lessons. The universe proved to the untouchable billionaire that the person you ruthlessly step on today might be the absolute only one holding the power to save your life tomorrow. When standing on the razor thin line between life and death, billions of dollars instantly become worthless paper. Kale's ultimate victory wasn't revenge. It was walking away with his dignity, leaving the arrogant CEO to drown in the agonizing regret of her own actions. While this cinematic tale is a work of fiction, the quiet strength, boundless compassion, and daily sacrifices of single fathers everywhere are entirely real. If you believe that arrogant pride will always pay a heavy price, type the word karma in the comments below. Or better yet, share a story of a time you witnessed an ordinary, hardworking person do something truly extraordinary. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel so we can continue bringing you more powerful, emotional stories. Until next time, always remember that respect costs absolutely nothing.